But we begin tonight with Russia still listening and still interfering in our elections. That is what we learned when the Justice Department announced indictments and sanctions Wednesday in a scheme that sounds straight out of 2016. The DOJ charged 2 Russian media executives in an alleged plot to illegally funnel millions of dollars to right-wing influencers by way of a pro-Trump media outlet.
It's Ken Harbaugh on the MeidasTouch network. Shocking, I know, but it turns out that some of the most influential MAGA commentators have been taking money from Russia to spread disinformation. Now, the biggest names among them claim they were victims of this scheme. I don't know how much that actually matters, because the propaganda they were spreading was straight out of Putin's playbook. Here's one of those influencers, Tim Pool, who was paid $100,000 a week to lie about Ukraine's war effort.
Ukraine is the enemy of this country. Ukraine is our enemy, being funded by the Democrats. I will stress this again. One of the greatest enemies of our nation right now is Ukraine. Ukraine is the greatest threat to this nation and to the world. We should rescind all funding and financing, pull out all military support, and we should apologize to Russia.
If you've been wondering how in the world so much of the MAGA universe has bought into this notion that Russia is the victim here, it's because of propaganda like this paid for by Russia. It's telling that as soon as this plot was exposed, these right-wing commentators who parade their opinions like they're actually rooted in principles, these commentators started to flip. Here's a tweet from Tim Pool, the person you just heard saying that Ukraine is America's greatest enemy and that we should apologize to Russia. I'll read it for our podcast listeners. He writes, "Upon reflection, I now understand that Ukraine is our greatest ally. As the breadbasket of Europe and a peace-loving people, we cannot allow the fascist Russians to continue their crimes against humanity. We must redouble our efforts and provide an additional $200 billion at once." This is how utterly vacuous these right-wing ideologues are. In the span of a single indictment, Tim Pool goes from calling Ukraine our worst enemy to saying they are our greatest ally. Now, Tim Pool and his fellow propagandists don't get a vote on aid to Ukraine. They're not members of Congress, but they are hugely influential in the MAGA sphere, and that has a direct impact on how Congress votes. Here's Joy Reid again with just a few examples. These are the tip of the iceberg.
Of course, it's not like Russia had to pay everyone, since we all know there are elected officials willing to push the Kremlin line for free.
Vladimir Putin has not said he wants to go march across Europe and take Europe. And the reality is Ukraine is not even a NATO member nation. But if you want to know something, Lloyd Austin and the others here, more than anything, want to send your uncles, your cousins, and your sons and daughters to the front lines in Ukraine.
I will not vote for $1 more to Ukraine. I will not vote for one more piece of materiel to Ukraine. We are far too entangled in this conflict. I believe we have extended this conflict.
What's in America's best interest is to accept Ukraine is going to have to cede some territory to the Russians, and we need to bring this war to a close.
I spoke with one of the good guys in Congress and an old friend, Jason Crow, about all this. He's a former Army Ranger and has been a stalwart supporter of Ukraine's fight for freedom. We cover a lot of other ground as well. Jason's a rising star in the Democratic Party and spoke at the convention in Chicago. I guarantee if you are not yet a fan of his, you will be. Here's me and Jason Crow. Thrilled to have Jason Crow on the Ken Harbaugh show. He's a former Army Ranger, represents Colorado's 6th Congressional District, and he's an old friend. Jason, welcome to the show.
Ken, it's great to be back, and always good to see you, my friend.
It was good to see you, however briefly, at the DNC. Loved your speech. We'll get into that. We'll get into a lot, but first, I've got to get your reaction to this indictment that was just unsealed, unveiling this massive Russian disinformation campaign using right-wing podcasters and other influencers to interfere in our election and equally dangerously to undermine Ukraine's defense. One of those wrapped up in this is Tim Pool. We ran the clip of him laying into Ukraine, calling it America's biggest enemy. He has since done a complete 180 on that after being exposed as a Russian agent, witting or not. You didn't see this coming, did you?
I'm assuming you're being sarcastic about that. But, I mean, listen, it's great to see these indictments, and the DOJ seize these servers and shut these operations down, because it's no surprise to anybody that Russia has a very long-standing effort to sow chaos and discord into our political discussions, to put these false narratives, to dump fuel on flames of tension within our own society. They did it in 2016. They tried to do it in 2020, and they're going to try to do it again in 2024. From Vladimir Putin's perspective, this is a really good investment to make, because he can, for very small amounts of money, he can, try to create chaos within our political system. And, the challenge for us is that it gives this impression to Americans and to American voters that there's this huge surge of resistance to some of our foreign policies in our support for Ukraine and our support for NATO and for our allies, when in reality, a lot of this is fabricated stuff, right? That's not to say that there isn't legitimate concern, right? That's not to say that there aren't legitimate people asking legitimate questions, but there are an awful lot of troll farms, an awful lot of fake efforts generating a lot of discussion and a lot of attention on social media that is just not true.
You have been stalwart in your support from Ukraine since the beginning of the invasion, even before that. Your pinned tweet on your official Twitter page is a phone call with soldiers in Ukraine. Well, why don't you share with the audience what you were communicating to them in that video?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about why I'm a supporter of Ukraine, but in that particular video, I was just about getting ready to walk across the street from my office in Longworth House office building on the Hill, and to vote on the most recent national security supplemental to support Ukraine. So I called these soldiers, these special forces operators who were in a bunker on the front lines. These are folks that I've been in touch with and had kept in touch with. And I told them I was getting ready to walk across the street and vote on that bill to pass new funding and to open up the spigots again of U.S. weapons and equipment and ammunition. Because these special forces soldiers, these Ukrainian operators, these are folks who were in active combat operations who literally told me they were running out of ammunition, right? So I called them and said, help is on the way, and we're doing everything to push it. So it was a very emotional moment for me personally, as a fellow combat veteran. All your combat vets, that listen to your podcast know there's a special camaraderie, regardless of nationality, between fellow combat veterans. So I know, what it's like to be on those front lines and to want more aid, want more help, want more attention to your plight, and not necessarily get it. Can be a very lonely situation. So I just want to let them know that they were not alone.
Yeah, I spent some time at the front with soldiers just like that a few months ago, and that was the refrain. I mean, the tension in those conversations was palpable, because on one hand, they were so grateful for all that America had done, but they were desperate for us to live up to our promises and terrified that Donald Trump might prevail in November and pull the rug out from under them. I'm actually headed back to Ukraine tomorrow, so maybe we can connect offline. You can tell me who those soft guys were, and I'll bring them some cigars for you. But I think I
appreciate you going over there. They
say that again.
They love to see. I appreciate you going over there and doing that. I mean, they love those visitors. It actually is a morale booster for them when people come by and let them know that we're standing with them.
Yeah. Yes, it certainly is. But in the back of my mind, I am deeply worried that Americans won't appreciate why their defense matters to us, and will choose a commander-in-chief who has called Russia's invasion brilliant, who has told Putin he can do whatever the hell he wants if NATO doesn't pay its bills. We have a lot riding on this election, but Ukraine's very existence is riding on our election, and I don't think I'm overstating it.
Yeah, I don't think you are either. I think it is that important. I mean, Ukraine cannot go this alone. We know they have the bravery, the courage, the resiliency, the toughness, the MacGyver spirit. You know, I always call them the MacGyvers of modern warfare. They can do incredible things with what people give them, but they do need the support, and it's in our interest. And I know you've long spoken about this, Ken, but this is not charity. Actually, this is not the American people giving charity to the Ukrainians. You know, it's important for us to help Ukraine fight and win because, you know, freedom-loving people and democracies of the world need to stick together. Otherwise, we'll be divided and we'll fall divided. But this is actually in America's economic and security interests directly. And for less than 5% of our annual defense budget, which is what our aid consists of across the years, we are securing food supplies. We are securing Europe. We are securing our 80,000 troops in Europe, the hundreds of thousands of Americans living there. And we're also at the same time restoring our own readiness because we're giving Ukraine, as you know, we're giving Ukraine our old supplies, our old equipment and ammunitions. And the new stuff that's being bought goes to our troops. So this is a win-win-win-win for the American taxpayer. And you don't get many of those.
No, you don't. My guess is your Republican colleagues get it. The vast majority of them get it. Some are even outspoken about it, but way too many are cowering on this issue. They're afraid of Donald Trump and now J.D. Vance, who could be one heartbeat away from the presidency, who has said, literally, not paraphrasing, I could care less what happens in Ukraine. Am I right about that, that within Congress, there is a broad consensus, but there's just fear among Republicans to stick their necks out?
Yeah, you know, the story of the Trump era with Republican elected officials, and I'm casting a broad brush here. There are some that stand out for their courage and for their independence and for doing the right thing. There's no doubt about it. But there are far too many who have given in to that fear for Donald Trump, because they know better, actually. They do know better. I talk to them. I have private conversations. They know that Donald Trump's a danger. They know this man is irresponsible. They know that supporting Ukraine is in Americans' national security and economic interest, and that this is a bargain for the taxpayer and that we should do it. But they're too afraid to say otherwise because of the takeover, the wholesale takeover by Donald Trump of the Republican base. You know, it has run astray of its conservative roots. This is not the party of Reagan anymore. This is not the party of the Bushes anymore. This is not an independent political party by the definition, the historical definition of a political party. This is the party of one man, right? And he demands full loyalty and fealty to himself, not to some ideology, not to some belief principle. And it's extremely dangerous, right? I mean, you should ask yourself, what does that party even stand for right now, right? I was raised a Republican in a Republican family. I know this. People that I love are Republicans. It certainly doesn't stand for the principles that it long stood for in its current iteration. That's not to say we can't get back there, and it can't get back there. And I actually firmly believe, as a matter of fact, that it's important for us to have a healthy, strong Republican Party for our system to work, right? As a Democrat, as a proud Democrat, I need to have good partners on the other side, people that believe that the earth is round and the sky is blue and facts are facts, to actually negotiate legislation and to get things done. And that's becoming harder and harder for me to do.
I think we got part of our answer about what the Republican Party of today represents during the RNC. And it really came into focus during the Democratic convention when it occurred to me that what we were doing there was nominating someone who reflected the party and who reflected the country, who projected this vision of hope and optimism and joy. I don't want to overuse the word, but you felt it in the arena those 4 days. It was a joyous occasion, and it reflected what Americans want, as opposed to the RNC and the Republican Party, where I think the inverse is true. The Republican Party has become a reflection of its leader, not the other way around. And it seems like everything they're doing now, from the nepotism at the RNC to the abandonment. We just talked to a Lutheran minister on this show, the abandonment of basic Christian principles within the evangelical community that's supporting Trump. The party has become a reflection of its leader, which is pretty ominous, because that is exactly the pattern that you see in every totalitarian takeover.
Yeah, I think that is a fair characterization of what has become of this party, and the vastly different visions, right? I mean, the contrast couldn't be more clear, right? You have the RNC was about fear and otherizing, and just these notions of division and pulling us apart. Listen, that stuff has a shelf life, actually. I think it doesn't last very long. Like, people fundamentally don't want to just always be afraid all the time and feel as though the sky is falling. There are very real challenges that our country faces. There's no doubt, and people are struggling in a lot of very real ways. But having a positive vision for how to move forward and how to come together and address that is fundamentally the way that we do it. It's what people want, but more importantly, it's what actually will be successful. It's what will mobilize the talents and the power of this country. Whenever we've done big things in our history, big important things, we've done it when we've come together, when we've focused on what we have in common, and we have a positive, proactive vision. Always. Yeah. We've never done big things by dividing each other and being afraid.
And that, to me, is the essence of patriotism, another idea, concept that the Democratic Party is reclaiming. I mean, you saw it there in Chicago. And as a vet, you were one of many who took the stage over those 4 days. How have you processed that in the aftermath? It filled me in the moment with immense pride to see the American flags, to hear those chants of USA. But in the aftermath, I realized something else, which is this is the most terrifying thing to MAGA today, is the reclaiming of patriotism by Democrats.
Yeah, we are reclaiming it, but we're also, in my view, it's not just about reclaiming what patriotism is about. It's about patriotism 2.0.
Yeah.
Right? This new American patriotism. I actually call it new American patriotism, because it's not just about waving the flag and tying yellow ribbons on the tree and talking about our accomplishments, which are important things to do, right? And I do them too. But this new version of patriotism, I think, allows us to be stronger and more honest and more unified than we have ever been. And here's what it looks like to me. It means actually having strength and confidence to look at our history and to say we have not always fulfilled our promise of the more perfect union, that we are not yet where we need to be, right? The beauty in America is the striving, the constant striving and work towards that more perfect union. But we're not there yet. And we have made some big mistakes, and we've had some really tough moments in our history that we need to be honest about. And if we're able to be honest about that, we can at the same time be proud of our ability for self-correction, for improvement, for moving forward. That is the beauty of our system that has built-in capacity for improvement and change that so many other countries don't have. And that, to me, is something to be proud of, and something that we can look to as this new type of patriotism.
Yeah. Well, we are reading from the exact same sheet of music there. And we hit that theme as often as we can on this show, a patriotism that holds America accountable, that wants us to live up to our promises instead of being stuck in the past, a purely regressive kind of patriotism. It's Ken Harbaugh. Quick break here because I have two favors to ask. We're off to a great start with the Ken Harbaugh Show on YouTube, but the podcast needs a little love. Please click the link below to follow, rate, and review. The success of shows like this really does depend on those ratings. And if you haven't yet followed me on Patreon, please check it out. It's free to sign up, or you can pitch in a few bucks a month. Every dollar goes back into this show and our pro-democracy efforts, including the reporting from Ukraine. Go to patreon.com/Ken Harbaugh. Thanks for the support. Are you looking for something simple and delicious to add to your wellness routine? You're not going to believe how delicious Manacora honey is. I actually hide it from the kids. Unfortunately, my son is almost taller than me now, so he can reach the top shelf, but this stuff goes fast in our house. I've never tasted honey like it. It's more like caramel, honestly. It's rich, creamy, and ethically produced by Manacora's master beekeepers in the remote forests of New Zealand. Manacora honey contains powerful nutrients to support immunity and gut health. The bees collect the nectar from the Manuka tea tree in New Zealand. The nectar is packed with bioactives, and the honey that is produced has 3 times more antioxidants and prebiotics than your average honey. A special antibacterial compound called MGO also comes from the nectar of the tea tree. It's a game changer, and all you need is 1 heaped teaspoon each morning to get the most out of the amazing bioactives. Additional usage throughout the day is completely fine, especially if it helps cut out other sweeteners. Manacora honey is honey with superpowers, and it's easier than ever to try it. Head to manacora.com/Ken to get $25 off the starter kit, which comes with an MGO 850 plus Manuka honey jar, 5 honey travel sticks, a wooden spoon, and a guidebook. Thanks, Manacora, for sponsoring this episode. I gotta switch topics to something quite a bit tougher, because it's the first week of school, or was the first week of school. We're coming off it, and we had, true to form, our first school shooting. And I dropped my kids off this morning, and I recall reading a tweet last night that said, remember what they were wearing. And that stuck with me, right? As a dad of 3, you shouldn't have to remember what your kids were wearing out of fear that it might be the last time you send them off to a day in school. But you represent a district that has had its own tragedies. You have a colleague in your Colorado delegation who is the avatar for gun fetishization, right? Lauren Boebert and her holiday cards and the AR-15 pens. I'm trying to get to a question here. Mostly I'm just venting, but I guess we should vent
because it's a damn nightmare. This is a national nightmare.
Yeah.
There's no other way to talk about
it. Is there any realization yet among your colleagues on the right that they are part of the problem? And let me ask it in a specific way. Are you still seeing AR-15 lapel pins the day after a school shooting, like we did after Uvalde? Or is there at least some self-awareness and shame seeping into that party over this issue?
There's unfortunately, I think, very little self-awareness and shame. Very little. And it's this is one of the reasons I got into elected office. Actually, I have kids. They do school shooter drills now. My daughter, when she was very young in kindergarten, came back and told me that she had what she called a bad guy drill that day and had to hide in the bathroom in case a bad guy ever came for them. I represent a district that had Columbine, had the Aurora Theater shooting, had 2 other school shootings, right? More shootings than any community should ever have to deal with. We're just failing on this. There's no other way to put this. Right? We're failing our children. We're failing our communities. There is now a collective trauma that our kids go through. in school that we didn't have to grow up in, because guess what? This is not the price of freedom. It never was until the last 2 decades, right? This is a fairly new phenomenon now. We didn't grow up with this. This generation is growing up with it. So it's not the price of anything. This is the price of failed public policy and failed leadership is what it is. So yeah, there's a way to fix this. We don't have to live with this. And we're the only industrialized nation in the world that has this problem, right? Which tells you that, we have something very broken in our system here. And I say that, Ken, being a gun owner myself, right? I've owned guns since I was a teen, right? I was given my first hunting rifle when I was 12. I started hunting when I was 12. I grew up hunting and fishing. And then I was a ranger. I used these weapons at war. I had them used against me. So, whenever Robert or the other people walk around with guns, I can tell you, I know more about guns than they'll ever know, than they'll ever forget about guns, right? And I know that they're lying, they're misrepresenting what gun culture really has historically been about in our country, and they're doing so for their own politics and for their own power, and it's frankly very disgusting.
Well, the latest disgusting example of that, of course, is Mike Collins, who represents the district where this latest school shooting occurred. And I mean, he's famous within Congress for campaigning on this over-the-top aggressive use of guns in his ads, strutting around with, images of Nancy Pelosi off to the side and an AR-15 over his back, telling Democrats he's coming for them and blowing up, I don't know, a trash can or something. Maybe we'll roll the clip. And all he has after an actual shooting in his own district are thoughts and prayers.
Hey, Mike Collins here, your pro-Trump America First trucker, running for Congress here in Georgia 10. Well, I understand Joe Biden was in town yesterday to talk about our elections. It seems that he and Kamala Harris called anyone who disagreed with the federal hijacking of this election a racist. Well, Joe, I got some news for you. Let me tell you what Georgians really believe. First of all, you count the legal votes that were cast in the state of Georgia, Donald Trump won this state, period. Number 2, get rid of those voting machines. Go back to paper ballots once and for all. Number 3, get rid of those ridiculous drop boxes across this state that the Democrats use to stuff the ballots and steal our elections. Number 4, let's go to national forensic audits in every election cycle across this country. As a matter of fact, it's one of the first bills I'll introduce when I get to Washington. You see, Georgians are sick and tired of weak-kneed, spineless politicians who won't fight for Trump, get to the bottom of 2020, and fix our elections. Well, if they won't do it, Mike Collins will. Send me to Washington. I'll fix this election. I'll get to the bottom of 2020, and I will fight for Trump's America First agenda.
Is there any approaching someone like that and bringing them over? I mean, I believe in eternal second chances. I think Governor Walz is an incredible example of someone who came around, who saw the light, whose own daughter, Hope, said, "Dad, I am ashamed by your A+ NRA rating. Mm-hmm. Look at that money and change your heart." And he had that change of heart and is become a champion of common sense gun reform as a hunter, right? Yeah. As a veteran. Yeah. Can that happen to Republicans?
I believe it can. I don't think I wouldn't do this job if I didn't think that people weren't capable of changing and we weren't capable of forcing change on any one issue, right? Because I would just be banging my head against a brick wall, and I don't really feel like doing that, right? So, I do think that people can change. We have to. That change is much slower than it should be, but we have to keep at it. We have to keep trying to personalize this issue for folks and let them know what their communities want. And look at the look at how much it's changed on this, right? Like when I ran in my district in 2018, one of my biggest issues was gun violence, right? And people were like, "Well, you shouldn't run on a frontline battleground district in the West on guns." And I'm like, "Well, the hell with that. I'm going to run an issue that I think we need to run on, and people want leadership on." And I did. And so it's just one example of many of how we are bending the curve on this, and we need to keep the pressure up.
Yeah. Last question. You carried Project 2025, like the actual plan.
That is a big book. Let me tell you, that's a heavy book.
Well, yeah, I mean, my question is that it? Is that real? Can you get that on Amazon? How does one get Project 2025 in a like print form?
Yeah, you can find it online, right? It's online in like PDF form. I did not ask the DNC organizers where they found the large version. I don't know. I mean, it was actually it was in the pages, right? It wasn't a prop. Like you pulled the pages open, and actually I was backstage with Elizabeth Warren because we were on around the same time backstage, and we were like piecing through the book together, looking at the parade of horribles in there, and it's pretty crazy stuff.
It is. And that's what I really want to ask about. It's more of a philosophical question. I mean, the audacity of the far right movement these days to actually write down their plan to end America as we know it and think that it's going to fly right by. And then the audacity of Trump world to try to distance itself from this dark vision for America when just about everybody in Trump's campaign had a hand in Project 2025 and vice versa.
Yeah, his closest advisors helped put it together. Yeah.
Right. Well, his vice presidential running mate is writing the foreword to the book written by Kevin Roberts, the head of the Heritage Foundation, the think tank behind Project 2025. I don't know if it's political malpractice on the part of Republicans to just be so overt in these attempts to undermine our institutions, or if they really have the confidence of the zealot, right? Which is the most dangerous kind, that they're gonna get away with it.
Well, I think there's some combination of things going on here. I think they're gonna try to do what they've done in the past, and that is engage in voter suppression, right? So hope that people don't vote. They're gonna unfairly attack and demonize and vilify their opponent and try to make it about the lies that they're telling about their opponents. And there is this playbook that they're using where they will say and do things, and they'll say exactly what they plan to do. But then when they're criticized for it or someone calls them out on it, they say, "I never said that. You're not hearing what you think I said, and you're not seeing what I did." Right? They just outright deny it, and it's like a national form of gaslighting, right? So you see a variety of these tools that they're using, and it's very dangerous and very disturbing stuff.
You called out specifically the plans in Project 2025 to gut the VA, to go after veterans benefits. How can we communicate that more clearly to our veteran buddies?
Well, we just say it, right? We just have to say it on this podcast and other places. Like, they want to privatize the VA, they want to cut VA benefits. And oh, by the way, Donald Trump has a long history of maligning our veterans and our fallen and our Gold Star families. It's pretty clear what he thinks about people who make sacrifice or put service above self as a priority. He thinks we're chumps, right? He's a man who couldn't possibly understand the notion of service. Right? See, it's always about the bargain for him. It's always about what he can get. What kind of deal can he get out of somebody, or how he benefits from it? He fundamentally doesn't understand this concept of service and sacrifice for others. He doesn't. And anybody who does that are chumps or suckers and losers. Right? He has said that repeatedly. Right? So we just got to keep on calling it out. Right? All of these things. Right? Walk away from our partners and allies. Isolate ourselves from the world. Let Russia and Vladimir Putin do whatever he wants to do to whoever he wants to do it to. It's pretty clear what he stands for at this point.
Is there anything we can do to get the people who were closest to Trump, especially the veterans, during his first term, to speak out now? I mean, many of them made their statements and then they retreated, and they're letting that statement carry the entire burden that I think they have to their responsibility to the American people. But Milley and, well, McMaster's been a huge disappointment with the book release, but Mattis, the others, should they be doing more?
You know, I think this is a consequence of making sure that people know that there's room for them here, right? That you know, we are not ideologically in lockstep. We're not going to push people out who want to come to our side for the purposes of saving democracy, right? Liz Cheney has come out and the other day, right? Who, you know, is an extremely conservative person, right? Adam Kinzinger, many others, right? We have to make sure that we're letting people know there's room for them right now, because our project is to help save our democracy and to push back against folks who are trying to undermine it. And that is a project that, you know, we can all come together and pursue together, right? And then there will be a time for us to have these very detailed debates, which we need to have. But right now, the challenge is so big and so stark that we have to make sure that we're making room for as many people as want to come our way to help us with this current project and this current challenge. And I also say that I'm proud of, you know, the Democratic Party for its a big tent approach, right? We don't shy away from debates, from tough conversations. Like, some people call that weakness. Right? Some people will be like, oh, we're having tough debates, or we're fractured, or we're not unified, or we're weak. Hell no. Like, having tough debates about tough issues and having the confidence to be open about that is exactly who we want to be.
Yeah, I'm with you. Couldn't have put it better. I think that devotion to those tough conversations and that introspection is how, albeit with a lot of bumps along the way, we wound up with the toughest, best ticket you could have possibly imagined, even just a few months ago in Harris Walz. And I think they're gonna run the table. But as my Senator Sherrod Brown says, you either run scared or you run unopposed. So we're gonna run scared between now and November. Jason, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Ken. As always, look forward to the next time. Be well.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Meidas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.